Hello, I'm Barbara Lee Diamondstein. Welcome to Visions and Images, American Photographers on Photography. Today we'll be talking to Horst P. Horst, who has been a photographer for nearly 50 years. He is internationally known as a photographer of famous faces, how they look, and how they live. First for his work in Paris and later in this country, his distinctive style is as celebrated as his subjects. A very warm welcome to you, Horst. You were born in Germany,
right.
Studied architecture with Walter Gropius and Le Corbusier before joining Paris Vogue
Right.
as a staff photographer in the early 1930s. It all started when you were an art student in Hamburg. How did you come to know Le Corbusier or Gropius?
Well, I didn't know Gropius, really. I went to the school where he taught, and I was sort of bored with Hamburg, and I wanted to go to Paris. So I wrote a letter to Le Corbusier whether I could start working with him. And he wrote me a letter back next few days. So I packed up. Within a week, I was in Paris at Le Corbusier. And poor man, he didn't have any job at that time at all. He was making plans, you know, pull down the marais, as they call it, the workmen's flats, and everybody in Paris hated him. You know? And he was not a very outgoing man. As a matter of fact, Dali said something funny about him, but not.
Why don't you tell us what that was?
Yeah. He said he's a Puritan, he's a Calvinist, he's a masochist, and he's a sadist.
And after you spent some considerable time with him, would you agree with any of those evaluations?
I'm afraid so.
So I assume the amount of time you spent with him was limited then.
About a year or so.
Is that what permitted you to so readily abandon your career in architecture
Yes.
to turn to photography?
That's right. I was very lucky. You know, there was an art director from American Vogue in Paris, and we lunched with friends, and he said, "Why don't you try photography?" I said, "I don't know anything about cameras. I've never taken a photograph in my life. I've never seen an elegant woman in my life. I don't know anything about dresses or fashion or anything." He said, "You go and do it." I went there, he let me have the studio. He said, twice a week for 3 hours. I went, and there was a model, all dressed up, and of course the assistant was there. He knew the technical part of photography.
Had you ever used a camera before?
Never.
Well, no wonder you've described your first photograph as a brave click of the shutter. Yeah. Can you remember for us what it was that you were photographing at that moment?
Oh, yes. There was a girl, naturally, in a black suit with a silver fox and a black hat.
Huynigan Hune was the man to whom you became an assistant at Paris Vogue in the early 1930s.
Once in a while I helped him building a set or that sort of thing, but during the pictures I wasn't there.
Were you closely associated with him? Was his work and his life an influence on you?
Oh, yes, definitely, you know, because, you know, then I got interested in photography. I tried to find out why is a photograph good and what is good about it, and I started to learn about art, you know, about...
How did you do that?
Well, you go to the Louvre, and you start to know people like Béraud, who was a marvelous painter at that time, and you start to know people like Cocteau, and you know, talk about art and all that. So that worked very well. In 1932, I had to come over to America the first time. I was supposed to be here for about 6 months or so with Mr. Nast, and that was so different to me, you see, that I didn't like it at all. I wanted to go straight back to Paris, and as a matter of fact, Mr. Nast fired me. because at one day he had all the photographs I'd done while I'd been in New York and laid them all out. And he knew a hell of a lot about photography, you know, he was unbelievably good. And he pointed out what was wrong with this and that and all this sort of thing. And then he said, I suppose you think you'll be as good as Stein. And I said, if I wouldn't think I'd become as good as Stein, I wouldn't do it. He thought it was the biggest insult ever, and he said, you can leave when your time is over here. And I was furious. I said, I'm going tomorrow. Then,
did you?
Yeah.
And what did you do in the interval till you returned?
I got back to Paris, and French folk picked me up again.
Who was Condé Nast?
Well, he was a publisher who started Vogue, really. And the man, I think, his influence on fashion photography, in any case, is what the equivalent of Diaghilev for ballet. You know, he started the whole thing. He got Steichen, you know, he's a fantastic man, you know. Steichen, having been a painter, gave up painting. He tore up all his paintings and took up photography. And Condé Nast had used him for Vanity Fair and made portraits, fabulous pictures. They were unbelievable. He was always very nice. As a matter of fact, when he left, he went to the Museum of Modern Art. You see, he said I should replace him, you know. Damn nice of him.
And you did?
Well, you can't replace somebody with this kind of talent, you know.
Condé Nast was a man known for his very exacting standards. What was it like to work for him?
And we used to build sets like crazy. You know, for every new collection, you know, what is the new collection going to be like? Is it going to be romantic? Is it going to be Italian? Is it going to be, you know?
And
did you have guess, you know? And so usually 2 or 3 different types of sets made before we actually photographed the dresses.
So were those sets very often realistic?
Yeah, sometimes. They started out being realistic, you know, I tried to be realistic, and then it did look too much like a studio photograph to me, you know, so I invented much more those sort of romantic, theatrical kind of situations.
At the very same time that those romantic and theatrical situations were going on, there was certainly the rise in the center of a very important movement in modern art going on in Paris. The Dadaists, the Surrealists, the Art Deco influence. How much of that influenced the work in your studio?
Well, of course it was influenced, you see, because at that time, painters or intellectuals or dressmakers, they were all friends. You know, it's not like today, you know, there's a complete division between, you know, dressmakers and living artists. You know, everything was together. So naturally, I mean, Dali, who made dresses for Schiaparelli, you painted lobsters on it, you know, and all that stuff. You know. So naturally, we were influenced by it. You know.
Why don't we talk about some of the restrictions that were placed upon you as an early photographer by your role with Vogue and Condé Nast? For example, did you feel free to develop your own style within them?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The editors in Paris were so for one, you know, and the more inventive it was, you know. And I liked black very much. As a matter of fact, at one time, one editor came in with a candle, please, some light, you know, because you couldn't see a damn thing. It was more silhouetted.
Other than Steichen, who was working at Vogue in those days?
Oh, well, there was George, Hoeningen, Steichen, Cecil Beaton.
Between all three of you working there, did you influence one another, or did you try to...
A lot of jealousies, you know, a lot of jealousy. Not between George and me, but Cecil was very jealous. Very, oh boy.
But he was a friend of yours.
Oh, yes, we saw each other, you know, but wow. You know, I wrote
or was
him
he
letter.
A friendly enemy of yours?
That's it. He wrote me a very nice letter just about a year or so before he died. He said, oh, those marvelous photographs you're doing for French Vogue now and all this other thing. You know. So I wrote him back, I wish you'd say that in public, what you say to write to me in private.
You've often said that your fashion photographs were meant to be portraits of human beings as well as illustrations of their ideas.
Right.
Did this mean that you spent time forming a relationship with the people whom you photographed, that you really felt that you had to know them and what they were about in order to portray them in any significant way, or were they prototypes or metaphors for something?
No prototypes at that time. They were all tremendous characters, you know. And the people, I love people, I love to photograph people, I love to feel what is, you know, and get at them, you know, and bring out the, you know, their qualities, rather. And that interests me very much. And that's, I think, what interests me most. I'm doing now a book on movie actresses, the old ones. Absolutely fascinating.
You have photographed many of those actresses in their younger days.
That's right.
Is this before and currently?
Now I'm doing the same things, and plus quite a lot of others, which I never knew before. And they're marvelous people.
Who are the people involved?
Oh, boy. Name it. Anyone you ever heard of.
Well, you tell us.
Bette Davis, Loretta Young. Oh, some of them, I'm saying like Bette Davis, you know, is as good as ever, you know. And most of them are pretty well off. I suppose a little bored. But the ones that are really interesting to me were the ones who didn't have a nickel, or were living in hospitals, like Mary Astor. Unbelievable people.
And are you going around to photograph them currently?
Yeah, I've just done about 60 of them. I need about 10 more for the book.
During the course of the years, who were your favorite models?
Oh, there was one girl called Lyd. She was an absolutely adorable girl. She was Russian refugee, and poor as a church mouse, she came in as, she brought in the clothes, you know, the delivery girl from dressmaker or something, and I saw her sitting here in the studio, outside the studio, and just said, Judy, you must take a picture. No, 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 didn't want to have a picture taken. But we finally persuaded her. And Mr. Nass said, well, I don't think that's right. You see, her nose is wrong, and it's, you know, something, you know. Well, anyway, I kept on photographing her, and she became the model at that time. And then Mr. Nass wanted to marry her.
Did he?
No. No, she married the lion tamer, I think.
During that period, at the very beginning of World War II, you came to America.
Yeah. When the war broke out, I took the last boat, the Normandy, which sank the day after we got here. And my last photograph there is that corset that you have here.
The fashion photograph of the corset.
Yeah, that's right. 4 o'clock in the morning. Last picture.
We should discuss some of the subjects that you have photographed. Why don't we start with Coco Chanel, who was one of your great friends?
Yes. Well, she was unbelievable. I mean, that, for ideas and for charm and for kindness and for, staggering woman. Unbelievable.
And how did that manifest itself in your life?
Well, when I took her photograph, the first one I took, she said, well, it's a very nice photograph of a dress, but it has nothing to do with me. You know? And I said, well, how can I have anything to do with you? Because I don't know you. Oh, you come to dinner. So I went to dinner, I saw how she lives, and then she said, you're going to come. And she sent me a background, sculpted or something, you know? And I found this canapé, or sofa it was called, that used to belong to Marie Antoinette, you know, because nothing was good enough. You know? And there she came, and she wasn't feeling very well, you know, because she had a love affair, had broken up or something. And there she was lying on this sofa, you know, just photographed her. And she loved the picture so much, so we ordered hundreds and hundreds of copies. And then she said, now how much do I owe you? And I said, well, you couldn't pay me.
Why did you do that?
Well, the pleasure that she likes it, you know, but she was the Queen of Paris at that time, you know. And after that, she gave me anything.
You've described her as the star of the circus. If she was the star, who was the ringmaster?
Oh, well, I suppose Noah Coward and Cole.
Greta Garbo was a fetish in Paris in the 1930s, as she was, I guess, everywhere else in the world. She was obviously then still willing to be photographed because you made a very splendid picture of her. How did that come about?
One day she wanted to meet the Sitwells, Edith Sitwell. So they came out and they were delighted to meet Garbo, of course. But Garbo was 1 hour late. And when she arrived, she walked straight through the house down to the pond to play with the little frog again. And she came back, and she sat the other side of the room, and I said, what's over there? Wouldn't talk. And finally the sun came out, and everybody sat on the terrace, and they talked, and everything went very well. And just as I can photograph that scene is in the book there. And Edith Sitwell said, you know, she's very, very nice. You know, she's not tall like an actress.
One of your very well-known subjects, of course, was Gertrude Stein. Were you a part of that circle, too?
Oh, yes, with Janet Flanner.
Janet Flanner was the American-born French correspondent of The New Yorker who was a celebrated and gifted chronicler of life in Paris for a good part of the century, till her death about a decade ago, I would say.
Right.
She was a great good friend of yours, in fact, and wrote the introduction to one of your books.
That's right. She helped me tremendously in the beginning. She wanted me to take a portrait with the New Yorker and the man with the eyeglass, you know.
The monocle.
Monocle. So she wanted to have the same sort of thing, the hat and all that.
Of herself.
Of herself, which I did. At one time in the 50s, I got a little bored with this whole thing, you know, the fashion, you know. Well, then, fortunately, Dana Breland came on the magazine, and she asked me to photograph houses, which I'd never done before in my life. And especially one she wanted, and through a friend of mine, I got in contact with her, and it worked.
Was that unusual for the privilege to, at least the economically privileged, to permit one to photograph the interiors and the private lives of public people?
Yeah, it was unusual, you know. They didn't want to have things published, you know.
How would you describe what your own special contribution has been?
Well, in this particular case, you see, I was supposed to photograph houses of people who, the way they live, you know. So you don't start out to rearrange the furniture, you know, or do lighting or something, you know. That's, you know, if it's dark, it's dark, you know, do about it. And that apparently, you know, was so completely different. You know, usually people brought a lot of light, and everything was, you know, every chair leg was straight and all that sort of stuff, you know. And I tried to make pretty pictures out of whatever there was, you know, in the actual light.
In the evolution of fashion, there are many new names who have come along since Coco Chanel. And if there is a contemporary reigning counterpart, it is, I would assume, Yves Saint Laurent.
That's right.
And you have photographed him for many years,
yes.
too. Can you tell us something about the circumstances of those photographs?
Well, he wanted to have his portrait taken recently, so I did it, and also he wanted to have his house in Marrakesh photographed. So I went and stayed with him for about a week or 10 days, and he was there, and couldn't be nicer, very shy, and very precise at the same time, you know.
Has Diane Vreeland, the one-time editor of Vogue, been an influence on your career?
Well, she started this, started me with photographing houses and things in that sense, definitely. Oh,
Have you ever
absolutely.
photographed her?
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. That's right.
And
it was
in recent
published
times?
in Billy Baldwin's book, and also in Architectural Digest recently, I think.
And in her recent book?
And that's right, I did the back cover for a book called Allure. Sorry.
With the aid of hindsight and all that you've seen and all that you've done from a sociological and economic or a political point of view, would you photograph the same people in the same way again?
Oh, no.
What would you do otherwise?
That's right, it depends on the circumstances, you know. I mean, with people, I don't make up my mind before how I'm going to photograph them. You know, something is happening, you know, and you have to catch it and understand it or try and bring it out. But I don't think we should photograph somebody with a preconceived idea, you know, and then it's not the person.
What counts in a photograph?
If I photograph people, it's where the people like it, the ones I photograph, you know, that's a success, you know. That's true. Well, once in a while, you know, I photographed all the first ladies, you know, 5 of them, I think. And the last one, Rosalind Carter, I didn't know where to photograph anymore because I photographed all the different rooms in the White House with somebody in it, you know. So I opened the door, and it happened to be a nice day with a monument outside, and cherry blossoms were out. And then there was a little flower arrangement somewhere, and I pulled out the narcissus and threw them in her lap, you know. She was sitting near the window. And there was much more in the spirit of her rather than being in a grand house like the White House.
Well, you've created a world of beauty and elegance that is often based on a great deal of economic privilege. Do you think that is still as convincing or as appropriate today?
Oh, I think so, but I mean, again, it depends on the type of people, you know, who they are. You know, money itself doesn't do it, obviously, you know. I mean, you can buy fashion, be very fashionable, spend a hell of a lot of money on your fur coat and things like it. It doesn't work, you know. And somebody has no money at all, you know, then do it.
In one of your books called Photographs of a Decade, and the decade you were referring to there was the 1930s, it was published, as I believe, in the mid-1940s. You wrote in the introduction that those photographs were social history.
Well, the era was a very peculiar one, you know, because they were the gay 20s, or what they called, you know, the flapper periods and all that. And this it sort of boiled down a little bit. And then there was a war threatening, you know. So everybody naturally was conscious of this thing. And it was not a matter of show-off, going out and showing off your diamonds and things, you know. It's rather, oh my God, it's going to go, you know. That feeling you had, and that's just sad. So the background of the whole was supposed to be elegance of the 30s, you know.
How do you compare the celebrity photographs of the 30s to the kind of celebrity photographs that someone such as Andy Warhol has taken during the last decade or so?
Well, I think it's a very good approach he has there, you know. Very personal, which is important, you know. Very, very personal thing. And very effective. You know, I've seen some good ones he's done, like he did a very good one of Yves Saint Laurent, which is absolutely marvelous. You know, done with very little and very strong. Very good.
If you were to give advice to a young photographer, is there anything that you would especially tell them, either to caution them or to try to assist them?
I know they do come and ask me, and I never know what to tell them. You see, you have to find these things yourself. You should never copy anybody, any photographer. I never look at other photographers, because, you know, that's disturbing, you know, I think. And you have to see it yourself.
What kind of equipment do you use? And does it
now
matter?
Mostly Hasselblads and Rolleiflexes, and, you know, different lenses and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Do you think it matters for...
No, not at all. It really doesn't. Absolutely not. You know, there's a famous story of Steichens. He did a photograph because, you know, people are saying, you know, you have to be technical like this and technical like that and this and that and everything. He took a cigar box and made a hole in it and put a film back and made a photograph of that without a lens or anything. And I believe this photograph is now in the Museum of Modern Art.
What are you working on now?
Well, that book, you know, and then do things for Architectural Digest, and I have to go back to Paris to do something over there for French Vogue. You know, it keeps you going. But, I mean, the sort of evaluating of one's work, I mean, don't think one should do it oneself, you know. Let other people worry about it. You know, there's always this question, is it art, you know? What do I know? You know, it's for other people to find out, you know, whether they think so.
Well, we were talking just before we sat down to talk here, and you were telling me of the price of one of your photographs.
Yeah.
In a way that surprised you. Did you ever expect there to be an aesthetic or monetary value attached to the work of so-called commercial photographers?
The last one went for $3,600 or something, you know. Unbelievable.
Have you kept all your negatives?
No. I have the negatives, I think, from the late 40s, 50s on. I had most of those. But the 30s, all this is gone. This went in Paris with the war, you know, and God knows what happened there. It's a pity. Yeah, there was one of the photographs that was auctioned off, another one of Chanel's, which I had to buy myself.
Why?
Because I haven't got it. I haven't got the negative or anything.
Did you ever expect your life or your career to unfold the way that it has?
No.
What were your expectations?
Well, to try to make a little money, try to make a living, and trying to have a good time, at the same time.
You've told us that...
And I'm not a businessman, to start with, I don't know how to run a studio. I did have one, but, I don't know this.
Why did you give up your studio?
Oh, that was Dinah brilliant, because she sent me all over the world to photograph these people and houses, and the people were sitting there in the studio, had nothing to do, So I gave it up. Then she got fired, and I wish I had a studio now, rather nice. But anyway, I can do without it.
Were there any photographers other than the ones that we have discussed who were a particular influence, either historically or contemporarily, on your work?
I think Nadar quite a bit. As a matter of fact, after the war, I went back to Paris and I went to Nadar's studio, and I bought about 100 or 200 of his pictures, all for nothing, 50 cents a piece or something, Amazing photographs. Amazing. Absolutely.
Do you collect the work of other photographers?
No, I haven't done that much. I have a few Steichens and a few Cecil Beatons and a few Pennings and that sort of thing.
In Hune?
Yeah, all of Hune.
How did that come about, that you have all of Hune?
Well, in his will, he let me have it. That's the way.
Were you deeply involved in the exhibition of his work at the International Center of Photography?
Oh, no. My dear, for about a year I've been working with him on this, because so much. No, they were very good. I think the exhibition is marvelous. First rate.
In the photograph, The End of the Party, which appears at the end of one of your books, I believe it is a courtyard at the Hotel Excelsior in Rome.
Yeah.
And there are empty chairs that are strewn about a courtyard. Right. It is a very moving, and for me, poignant photograph, particularly coming at the end of a book. I wonder if there was a statement or a moral judgment that you were making, including it in that way and in that place.
The including in the book, of course, that was purposely done, the end of a party. Yeah. But when I photographed it, I just looked. I went through to my room and I saw down in the courtyard there were the chairs, and I just photographed it, finishing the film in the camera. It looked very pretty, I thought.
Thank you, Horst, for being part of today's program. I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein for Visions and Images, American Photographers on Photography.